Hello everybody. Today we're going to be taking a look at the amazing Nikon Z6. And before we start though, I'd like to thank my subscribers. To all of you who have been with me for quite a while, I really appreciate that. So I don't get a chance to hardly ever talk to you guys or see you, but just a big thank you goes out to you all. So thank you. Now, I was looking possibly checking into getting a good mirrorless, and I figured it might as well be a full frame. And since I'm already mostly a Nikon shooter, I think looking at the Z6 or the Z7 would be the correct thing to do. So the Z6 was considerably less money, and from what I did some researching on and listened to other photographers, the Z6 does really good in doing video, and that's what I was looking for, something that I could use to do 4K movies. I don't necessarily have to render them in 4K, but at least I have them, so in case I do. But looking at the full frame, I can also get some of the full frame advantages too, with the increased background blur if I need it. Super high ISO. I was checking, in fact, I shot again with this camera last night. The ISO is spectacular, out of this world. I took it up to the maximum, so we're going to be taking a look at those images, but I took it up starting at about 1600, and I took it up to as far as they would go. Of course, it's not really usable to me if you're shooting at the full ISO, the maximum ISO, but at least if you're shooting close to that, you're going to get some pretty amazing results with that. So I wanted to try the camera out first. So what I did was rent the camera along with a lot of people call it the kit lens, 24-70 f4 lens, but it is super sharp. There's nothing wrong with this lens. And then if you shoot wide open at f4, you can still get some pretty nice background blur, and it's very usable for portraits. And I've done that, and I've also used it for sports. So I rented that, and because the Z6 and I guess some of the newer Nikons now are using the XQD card, so I had to rent out the XQD card because of course I have compact flash cards and SD cards, which do not work in these cameras anymore. And along with that, I had to get a card reader. And something else that I wanted to do was use my older Nikon lenses, so I also rented the adapter. It's called the FTZ Nikon adapter, which allows me to put this adapter onto the front of the camera body, and then I can attach my other Nikon lenses, the f-mount lenses, onto the front of this adapter. So I did that using a couple different lenses. My favorite, the 70-200 at 2.8. And I've also, I used a really neat lens that I'm going to show you some of the results. It's a fisheye lens. So the first thing I did when I got this camera was to set up the back button focus. I just love shooting that way. Once you get used to shooting that way, it's hard to go back to the regular. So the way you do that, you go into the custom settings menu, and then you go over to autofocus A. And then you're going to go down to A7, AF activation. And then you're going to go to AF on only. We're going to scroll over and we're going to hit enable. Now we're set to the back button focus. Now the Nikon Z6 does not have a built-in flash. And if you want to fire a flash, you can either use a remote adapter if you want to fire a flash off camera, or you can actually just put a flash onto your hot shoe. And normally if I do that, I'll use this kind of a flash as a fill, or I'll bounce it off the ceiling. And you can also, now just because it doesn't have a built-in flash, you can still fire an off-camera flash or strobe with it. Let me turn the camera on, that would always help. Always turn the camera on and take your lens cap off. Okay, so you can use that to fire remotely. Some of the things that were important to me as I was looking at this camera was the ability, of course, to do 4K, so I can shoot in 4K, also to do a beautiful time lapse, and of course, not to mention the beautiful image quality that I'm getting if I'm doing, I still do headshots, although I'm retired now from wedding photography. I still do occasionally portraits and headshots. And while we're on the subject of wedding photography, I've always been a stickler for using the camera that has a dual card slot. And of course, this particular one only has one XQD. It's supposed to be very reliable. Now that I'm retired from wedding photography, having a single card slot I can live with now because it's not quite as important having a dual card slot when I was photographing that once-in-a-lifetime wedding. And just in case something were to happen to your camera as it was riding to the cart, so many things can happen. If you are in business for any length of time, you've learned about Murphy's Law. So, but now these are supposed to be a lot more reliable, so I hear. So if I was still doing weddings, would I use this camera? I would probably consider the single lens reflex, the D850 probably, just to give me that insurance policy, because it's really no fun if you have to explain to the bride and groom, hey, sorry, I lost part or a lot of your images. So, all right, so I just wanted to mention that. So when I first started using my camera, I took it out and I wanted to do a time lapse because, like I said, that was important to me. Also, which was important, was doing slow motion movies. I thought that's kind of cool, something I can use. So before I went out there to do a time lapse, I set my camera up so I was all ready to do that time lapse. And I noticed that the time lapse setting was grayed out. So I, of course, went online, did all kinds of research, checked out all different possibilities, did everything the manual said, things that I was supposed to do. Nothing worked. So I called Lens Rentals and I spoke to a customer service tech rep there. And I got to tell you, man, I had such great service out there. So I do want to give a plug to Lens Rentals. I am not an affiliate, but I'm thinking about becoming an affiliate because I haven't seen such great customer service for a long, long time. So anyway, what they did was he walked me through, again, all the steps very quickly, actually. And I did all the steps that he told me to do. And as it turned out, there was a problem when I attached a lens. The time-lapse setting did not go. It did not highlight. So he said he was going to send me another camera body, and it arrived the next morning before 9 o'clock. So, and I sent that one back, of course. So I had a camera in less than 24 hours. So just strictly amazing. So I think it's important that when you know of or have experience of a company that really treats you right, it's not all about taking money and, they forget about you. So many companies today, you can't even talk to anybody. But here I got on the phone and everybody I talked to was nice and polite. And then when I finally got the service rep on there, they knew exactly what to do and they took care of it very quickly and very, very efficiently. So thank you for that, Lens Rentals. I just wanted to give a plug. So let's take a look at the images that I came up with using the Nikon Z6, both in the still photography mode and also doing movies, slow motion movies, and we'll take a look at a time lapse also. So once they sent me the Z6 replacement camera, where the time-lapse feature worked, I went out and tried doing several time lapses. Now, one thing I discovered that I want to share with you, if you do a time lapse and you have a problem like you see here, a little flickering effect. So the way that I fixed that, I went into the photo shooting menu, went to flicker reduction shooting, and you turn that on. So I guess what that does is just reduce or gets rid of that flickering. So once I did that, I did a little testing and I took it back out again and I got some time lapse that didn't have that annoying flickering effect. And something else that I want to bring up, which I think is important, that you can actually view the exposure that you're getting by looking through your viewfinder or even on your screen. And this way you can set up your exposure by changing either your shutter speed or your ISO, and then you can see the results. And of course, if you notice, on the right hand side you have your meter. So for the most part, you want to get that meter in the center where it reads 0. And the way you set that up is go into your custom setting, D, shooting display, down to D8, apply settings to live view, and you're going to turn that on. So now you notice that when you make a change in your camera settings, f-stop and aperture, you're going to see exactly what you're getting. Now with that said though, if you're going to be shooting, say, in a camera room and the room is kind of dark, you can be shooting with a lower ISO, like say 100. As you look at the camera, it's going to be very dark if you can see anything at all. So that's when you have to go back and then you're going to turn it off. And by turning that off now, you can see what you're going to be getting even in a darker room. But when you set the live view on, you're going to be getting what you see. So one late morning as I was walking my dog, we came upon this beautiful, beautiful copperhead, kind of a large copperhead. So I thought, wow, this would be kind of neat if I can photograph him. So after taking my dog back, I went and got my Z6 and I was hoping he'd still be there. I guess he was sunning himself. And I did find him. And I wanted to put on a macro lens and get real close to him, but my wife was against that. She insisted that I stay further back, so I did. I put on actually the FTZ adapter along with the 70 to 200 millimeter f2.8 lens, and I started taking a couple photographs, but mostly I wanted to see how the results would be if I were to shoot in 4K movie. So something else that I wanted to test in this camera would be the high-speed shooting mode, where it shoots at 12 frames per second. Now normally I don't have to shoot that fast. I was never really a sports shooter. So I went out, photographed a few of my friends as they were playing pickleball. And using the adapter along with my 70 to 200 millimeter lens, I found the quality was really spectacular. Even in the kit lens, as I mentioned, the image quality is spectacular. Now, something else that I wanted to try when using the adapter was to put on an old, it's called a Peleng lens. And you have to focus with it manually. It's a fisheye, I believe it's about 8 millimeters. So this is kind of for fun, if you want to get something that's really wild, interesting looking, just to break up your shot. Now, it's not a very sharp lens, I'll give you that. The quality of it as compared to the other Nikon lenses is way subpar, but it's kind of fun to use. And also with the Z6, when you're shooting movies, you're able to take photographs as the movie is being recorded. So that's a kind of a cool feature. However, when you're shooting 4K movies, I wanted to see the results. So here you can see the result of an image I took from a 4K clip. And it's almost a 6 megapixel file. So this is just a neat way of grabbing still images from your 4K movies, where if you're doing a portrait series and they're involved in doing different things, you can capture that in a movie mode And then you can grab a still for that so they can use that in their album or in their folio. This is the kind of quality that I was looking for. And here you can see I photographed a few small products using the Z6. So here I'll set the camera to shoot in slow motion mode. So if you look on the menu, I chose the 1920 by 1080 30p times 4 slow motion mode. And then here I'm using the 70 to 200 millimeter lens doing slow motion. And the Z6 along with the 24 to 70 millimeter lens and also the 70 to 200 millimeter lens does an outstanding job in doing headshots. And then here you can see in the camera room I set it up for a self-portrait, and I was using the 24 to 70, and usually if I'm shooting in the camera room I'll set the white balance to custom, and that's what I did here. And then you can see the clarity of that lens, just super sharp. And this is the color you get right out of the camera. And then I did another headshot outside, and this time I used a 70 to 200 millimeter lens, and I found a location that was in the shade. However, there was light coming through, so you can notice I got some hair light and a little bit of a, I call it kicker light on the sides, just to add a little bit more dimension to your photograph. And you can even see there's some light that's coming in from the back on his shoulders. And when I took this portrait, I did have the live view setting that we just talked about turn on, so I can get the exposure that I want, and I can see it on the screen as I turn. In this particular case, I just turned the shutter speed. I believe the aperture here was at 3.2. So overall, I thought this camera was really spectacular. There's a few things that could use improvement, but as far as image quality, it's there. Super high ISO image quality is there. Great video. And the Z6, of course, is a 24.5 megapixel sensor in there. And for most people, myself included, that's way more than adequate. And the only thing that I didn't like too much is the amount of shots you get on a battery charge. I think it's something like 310. Not very good when you compare it to the Nikon D7200, which gives you over 1100 shots per charge. So that's pretty amazing. Other than that, there was nothing too major that was annoying, except I could say, if I had to nitpick, I would say that when you go to take out your memory card, it's a little tricky to get a hold of, but that's just simple nitpicking. And I think that might be able to be corrected. However, I'm hoping when they do their next upgrade to the next model, they do add a second memory card slot. So let's face it, most of the similar camera bodies that you see have a dual card slot. So Nikon, if you're listening, I think once you put that dual card slot in, you're going to pick up a whole lot of extra customers, people that shoot weddings and other events that cannot take the risk of anything happening. So really not too much to complain about, and there's a whole lot to love about using this camera. Not to mention the tilt touchscreen, very important also. And being that it's full frame, you get beautiful background blur and overall fantastic image quality coming right out of the camera. Thank you very much.